So, Monster Hunter Rise has been out for a couple months as of this recording, and I have some thoughts. A lot of thoughts. So this is me attempting to bring those thoughts to you in a few minutes. Let's just jump right into the good. Monster Hunter has a simple structure to its gameplay. Hunt monster, skin monster, and build armor out of what you skinned. Basically, hunt, skin, build, repeat. And it's this simplicity that allows Monster Hunter to flourish in what it sets out to do. The entire point of the franchise is to hunt monsters, so every mechanic in the game exists to illustrate that point. And what makes Rise to the top are its improvements in making that even simpler. Combat is faster and more refined than ever, with a moveset allowing for more diversity in playstyle. The training arena has more utility and conveniences to actually train and practice before heading off into a fight, and the loading between zones and fights is barely a moment long. The addition of a Palamute makes traversing much quicker and allows the fights to truly be the center of attention. Wire bugs allow for both versatility and movement, as well as granting a wider scope and abilities, making for an entirely new Monster Hunter experience. The designs of the monsters are the best they've ever been, with better movesets and a showboat of personalities to really make their fights a joy to behold.
This is for my fellow hunters!
All of this with an incredible soundtrack and sound design come together to make a flawless gaming experience. It's really all the meat of a game that's been perfected in Rise. And this is where my complaints come in, because none of them revolve around the important factors to a fun game. But seeing how Rise is now perfected than necessary, I think now's a good time to discuss its flaws. In my concerns with Monster Hunter Rise, I spoke a little bit about how the environment in Rise seemed to be a simpler, duller landscape to make room for more fights. And I turned out to be right. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Many would argue that the game is just trimming off the fat of the environments so we can have fun in the moment-to-moment battles. But I really dislike this mindset. I don't like World Hunts because it just had cool fights. I liked it because it felt like a place I was living in and I could map out an entire plan in my head of tactics in an upcoming battle. But in Rise, every zone is the same with minuscule differences because the focus is the hunt and nothing else. I enjoyed World's environment so much I would jump into expeditions just to roam about because of how lively it was. In Rise, I tried to get to a monster as soon as possible to ignore how lackluster the environments in the game are. And I don't think this has anything to do with hardware limitations either. The Switch may be small and portable, but if it could run massive AAA titles like Breath of the Wild, Witcher, and whatever else, you'd think it could handle a denser, more saturated environment in Rise. But hey, that's just me. This is a pretty big sting to my enjoyment of Rise, but I understand how many prefer a simpler environment for the fight. One thing I think is undeniable is probably what most consider to be Rise's biggest thing: difficulty. Rise is the complete opposite of Dark Souls. Here we tell the monsters to get good because the game is just way too easy. And there's a simple fix to this. It's not the movesets, the monsters hit plenty. There's a damage number issue going on here. All they need to do is bump up the amount of damage a monster produces. If it's 10 points for a slash attack, then make it 20. It's obviously not that simple, there's a lot of math that goes into it, yada yada yada, but the premise is the same. I don't have fun hunting a monster who can't put up a fight. Going up against Nergigante in World was the hardest part of the game for me. I had played dozens of hours before I got to him and it felt like a real challenge. I triple cutted to him 2 times and finally beat him on my 3rd attempt, 1 cut away from another loss.
That's a lot of damage!
And what's funny about that is his moveset was pretty simple to avoid. I lost all those times because I was getting greedy with my hits and not managing myself properly. I got hit by Gossarak way more than Nergigante, but I've never carted to Goss for a simple reason. He just doesn't hit hard enough. And this inability to make me cart makes my experience with all the monsters in Rise a trivial one. Sure, I beat Goss in sub-X minutes, but Goss never had a chance in the first place. And when that experience is a shared one between all players, I don't feel like a talented hunter bringing down a grand predator. I feel like a bully picking on a weak creature. Which brings me to a strange conversation going on in the Monster Hunter community around whether or not Monster Hunter Rise has enough content. At first I thought this was a ridiculous question. Of course it has enough content. I played for over 100 hours and that's way more than I would play the average game. And that still holds true. But I do understand the frustration with the lack of anything to do in the endgame. There are no randomized missions, tempered monsters, or interesting gear to make. There's a loop of farming talismans which you can do by farming Narwa and Rampage quests, both of which are meant to be complete outsiders to the typical Monster Hunter experience. One's a tower defense game and the other is a fun, different type of hunt. And even if these game modes were always fun and exciting, hunting for one piece of gear to drop randomly is not an ideal endgame, because it's just not exciting. I'll wrap the video there, but there are more minute issues in the game like story and cutscenes, which are more subjective and unimportant to the general player base. Monster Hunter Rise is 2021's Game of the Year and deserves all the praise it gets. My complaints aren't damning to the experience, they just hurt it. But still, with the main meat of the game being as perfect as it is, I can excuse the lack of that. Thanks for watching.
Let's go!